to connect industry partners and other like-minded individuals. So today we will be focusing on the topic of innovation procurement of SMEs. If I just get the slide before, please, Nick. Just, yeah, there you go. So this is about kind of emphasizing on the sharing of best practices of how SMEs and local authorities can work together in procuring new solutions that can be deployed at city scales. So this is also in connections with our wider Catapults Challenging Procurement Program. So in a minute, you'll hear from some of our internal Catapult speakers, as well as some SMEs who will share examples of successful collaboration that have delivered innovative impact across our sectors to address different industrial challenges. Next slide, please. So for those who haven't met me before, my name is Sarah Wong. I'm the SME Development Manager working in the London office of the Catapult. I'm going to be hosting the session today. So just a quick standard housekeeping, just to let you know that this session is recorded and we're streaming live on YouTube. During the session, if you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A function. I would advise you to put your questions down as and when the event is happening. There won't be any kind of individual Q&A, but rather we'll be addressing questions during the panel discussion. So next slide, please. Without further delay, I'll just go through the agenda for today. The presentations and panel discussion part will last around 1 hour and a half, 1 hour and 10 minutes in total, so finishing at around 10 past 11. We will then provide a different web link to join the remaining 20-minute networking. We also have a fantastic line of speakers and our panel chair today. So just to introduce in order, in a minute, you'll hear from our very own Dr. Oliver Kirsch, who will talk about the Catapults Challenging Procurement Program in more detail, which he's leading on. We'll have George Johnston, founder and CEO of Nitrous. And they provide tools and data for engagement and collaboration between public sector, corporate leaders, and SMEs to create smart city solution. I'm pretty sure George will talk about that in more detail. We will then welcome Martine from EMU Analytics, and she's heading a London-based data analytics and visualization software company, and she'll share with you their journey in supplying digital solutions to one of their partners, which is the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. And we also have Jason Warwick, director of a business called Urban Integrated, where they will develop highly customized smart cities dashboards for local authorities to provide real-time data to help local planning. We will then invite the speakers into a panel, and this will be chaired by Malcolm Harbour, our associate director from the Catapult, who will give an introduction in a little bit. And then finally, we'll have Oliver to share with us a few upcoming innovation procurement launches before I then wrap up and then invite us to networking. So I'll now just pass the virtual floor to Malcolm to take a few minutes to introduce himself. Malcolm, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Yes, I'm just seeing. Am I online? Yes, I am. Yeah. So I'm Malcolm Harbour. As you heard, I'm an associate director of Connected Places Catapult, and right, I'm just starting my video so you can see me. We seem to have some. I think I've started it anyway. But anyway,
yeah, we can see you, Malcolm.
You can see you. That's right. Yeah. I can't see
Great.
myself. Anyway, you will hear a lot from me later. But just to say that I've been involved in our work on procurement, which you're going to hear about shortly from Ollie Kirsch, who runs it, challenging procurement. And I joined Connected Places 2 years ago now. And I spent 15 years in the European Parliament working a lot on public procurement and also chairing a parliamentary committee. So I have some experience of chairing meetings. So you will hear from me later, but all I would encourage you to do is please put your questions in the Q&A, because I will be monitoring it closely through all the presentations, and I will be picking up your questions and to put them to the panel later on. So please help us have a really lively discussion by putting forward as many interesting questions as you can. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, for the quick introduction. So next up, I'd like to ask Ollie to step in and introduce to us the Catapults Challenging Procurement Programme. Ollie.
Sure thing. Thanks, everyone. So Sarah's already covered. I'm Oliver Kirsch. I lead the Challenging Procurement Programme here at Connected Places Catapult. We've been running this programme for a couple of years, and it's structured in recognition that well-run procurement can form an investment mechanism and a facilitator for innovation across many of Connected Places sectors. And our efforts on this programme are directed to support both public authorities in how they approach their approach to the market, and also innovators such as the main audience of this event. There's a whole bunch more information on what challenging procurement is and our activities on the website if you just search for that phrase. And obviously my email address is on here, so by all means I'd love to chat to you if you're interested as well. This event forms the first crossover of a monthly series of webinars that Malcolm and myself have been running, focused around various aspects of procurement, and this long-standing series that Sarah has facilitated, Sarah and Nick, on SME-focused connections cafes and networking, and I hope it's a very useful session. We'll ask for your feedback at the end. Before we move on to the actual talk, it'd be really great to get to know the audience a tiny bit. So Nick, if you could just pop up the first poll, please. This simply asks a couple of questions about what sort of organisation do you work with, and then there's a second question pop up subsequently. Well, I'll give you a moment to answer that, and then Nick, if you can pop up the results, since that's quite a nice closed question. Let's keep this moving pace. Are you able to pop up the results, Nick, for this one? Sure, great. Okay, well, that's as expected. A good majority of the audience are SME focused, but we have a great coverage across both large private organisations, academia, local government, or central government as well. So that's great. If you can move to the next poll, Nick. So, okay, this just expands upon that, just asking about what role you take within your organisation. We just give 10, 20 seconds to answer this and then pop up the results, that'd be great. Okie doke. And we have a more of a mix there. Less on the policy side, which is not too much of a surprise. That's kind of more of a focus of the series that we run on the Challenging Procurement Programme specifically, but a good mix of different roles within organisations. Thank you. If we can go to the next one, there's just two more questions that we'll pop through really quickly. All of this should just help our speakers frame their presentations and the discussion that we'll have later on. So this is obviously just moving a little more towards the subject matter. Okay, Nick, we just pop straight to the results. Okay, very interesting. Okay, well, this will be very educational, I think, in terms of how the discussion goes, but there's a relatively low familiarity with working with public bodies and the whole of procurement processes here. So I think we'll definitely bear that in mind when we get into the panel discussion. And then the final question, Nick. So this one will be, I imagine there'll be more of an emphasis on the final option here, but this is just asking, for those of you who have engaged with innovation procurement with public bodies, how have you found that? As a general sweeping statement. And if we just pop straight to the results there. Okay, well, nice mix. Okay, so unsurprisingly, a whole bunch of people not engaged in these processes. And well, nuanced. So that's great. That means we'll be able to bring out some nice best practices from our discussion in a moment. So without further ado, I will step out of the way and let's move into the presentations. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ollie. So yes, we'll just start introducing our SME speakers. So first up, we have George from Nitrous, who will give his presentation. George, over to you.
Thank you. Lovely to be speaking with you all, and I'm going to share my, well, definitely attempt to share my screen. Hold on. Good. And I wanted to introduce you to some aspects of innovative procurement that we've been working on at Nitrous. I founded the business about 5 years ago, having a previous background working in large technology companies as well as within public policy for UK government. I put quite a lot of effort into supporting things like the G-Cloud frameworks and working in the Cabinet Office on the development of the initial G-Cloud, but have since also been advising many cities on trying to make their work more accessible to SMEs. And of course, a procurement relationship is a really big part of that. So it was quite interesting to see the poll there, imagine from some of the SMEs as well. It's a very mixed response. I think if you ask that question maybe 5 or 10 years ago, we might have seen something a bit more negative, but there's been lots of progress. But there is also lots more room for progress as well. So some of these stats won't be unfamiliar to everyone, but from for the SMEs in the room, I think that there is a big degree of gap in your solutions and your innovation coming into the public sector, and that's for a variety of different reasons. Some of it's cultural, some of it, of course, is political, but often it comes down to risk, and looking at how we can de-risk that to allow the public to access all of that great innovation in a safe and secure way. That's a really big component to our work and where we want to support. We think as a digital native company, technology isn't necessarily the solution, but it is a key to being able to address some of those problems. So today I just wanted to take you through where we think some of the landscape is in terms of innovation inside procurement and some of the digital opportunities to address it. So we have things like increased innovation is coming through a diversification of providers. Although you might have things like aggregation and disaggregation per specific contracts. So on one hardware contract, typically you look for more disaggregation where there's more specialization in hardware. Yet on software, you might look at more aggregation where you pull many different suppliers together to deliver a software suite of solutions to address the outcome you're trying to procure for. However, diversification and innovation go hand in hand, and by more diversification, we will enable more innovation. So I think that's just a very natural force. More is better. Breaking up of contracts from large suppliers to increase satisfaction amongst public sector bodies. That speaks for itself. Increase efficiency in the application process by getting SMEs procurement ready. There's a lot of work around how we help SMEs get procurement ready faster. There is, I mentioned the culture gap, but there's also the technical gap. And there's many things that can discount against large suppliers, SMEs on public procurements, which are sometimes quick wins. These might be things like certain certifications like ISOs or ISO 27001. It might be product features such as considering earlier on how data is stored, your server or hosting providers, and where the data is stored, how the data is protected, with considering encryption earlier on, and of course accessibility, and trying to adopt some of the maybe it's the GDS central government digital service standards earlier on if your primary customer is going to be the public sector. And then awareness of challenges and opportunities across the public sector. And this is more on the public sector side. We do work with all 32 London boroughs, and we are shocked by the number of shared challenges that they all have, and also the number of duplicated procurements for the same solution that they're all buying. Now, this is quite unique to London. In places like New York, you have more aggregation of procurement, where the central city is procuring on behalf of all the different wards or boroughs in New York. But at the same time, it's a big problem. So we feel kind of we're in this aggregated procurement stage where there's been a lot of work and solutions on the market that are looking to now leverage all these great procurement APIs to pull all of these opportunities in one place. And that's great. We can do analysis. We can help you as a supplier understand when your competitor might be renewing their contract, or when there's an uptake in public spend in a vertical or industry that's really important to you. But where we feel there's a great opportunity for the transformation journey is, as I mentioned, looking at that challenge-based procurement and identifying what are some of the challenges. For example, improving accessibility for electric vehicles, or reducing pollution in the capital through electric vehicles. And a great example of that being a challenge and a potential procurement around electric vehicle charging points would be great. So we have 3 boroughs right now, all purchasing independently from 3 different suppliers electric vehicle charging points. If you look at the capital e-sourcing data, that's kind of shocking, but it's also a real issue because each one of those contracts are independent, so they're being negotiated independently, and that means that suppliers are able to negotiate different deals. There's no bulk buying power there, for example, or purchasing power. There is integration silos. All of those different providers, of course, don't integrate with each other. And there's no mandates or standards in place to enable that yet. So, of course, then things like innovation coming from integration and single dashboards or the rest of it is going to be a struggle. And then move towards collaborative procurement, which is then, as I was saying, how can we do more joint procurements following that challenge? So we feel this is a potential journey that we're going to see tools and digital services enabling. And then we have a bit of a view here of where we've been tracking some of the solutions coming through. Legacy incumbents typically are more corporate focused, and they are looking at solutions that are more targeted to consultancies and Accenture to be able to help Accenture sell more to the public sector. That's not really addressing the problem of being able to get SMEs into the public sector, leveraging some of these data and insights and tools. And we find that often even the disruptors, the new procurement tools, the procure tech tools, are still, of course, targeting the corporate space. And that's where there's better sources of revenue and more opportunities to grow their businesses. So we feel that the public sector has definitely a role to enable some of those solutions and tools that are more targeted to help SMEs get into the public sector. So about 1.5 years ago, we went through the process ourselves. We went through a procurement process, and we started to work with the Mayor of London, the GLA, and the London Office of Technology Innovation. And we built a solution called 33, which was designed to aggregate all of the different procurements from different platform data sources into one central place. And you can see here, some of those opportunities I mentioned. You can understand buyers, you can observe competitors, you can anticipate rebids. There's other tools on the market. There's great tools like Tussle, which you may be familiar with. I recommend you checking out. They're a bit more SME friendly than some of the others. But where there's a really big gap in data sources, which can create a whole lot of value, is a very separate data source, which is around the solutions. So you can get contracts data, you can get sourcing data. So here's an advert for a new procurement. We're going to aggregate that and post that for people to see. There's lots of data around, and this is the actual contract. The contract was for this value, and this is mandated by law, open public procurement regulation. You have to say that this was procured on this date with this supplier, but it really stops there. There's no mandate then to take that further and say, actually, in that contract, what is the solution, the module, the version, the category of that solution? How can we actually map what is the technologies being procured, and what those platforms of technologies are, and some of the details around the technologies, so that we can then do a lot more insights around, right now, are 2 or 3 public sector organizations buying the same thing? Can they actually look to where there's some pre-procurement collaboration happening, look to other organizations, public sector organizations, which are going to be renewing a contract of that solution or a similar solution? How can we leverage lower prices by leveraging that purchasing power? Okay. And then how can we unlock more technology integration by having solutions and identifying solutions through contracts which can already integrate with each other and mapping that. So what we did on the public sector side with the local government and the boroughs was then trying to address that data and how can we gather and collect that very unique data source, which we're going to be launching on the London Data Store, but also using in 33. So against all of those contracts, you're also able to see the actual technology solutions. And I can show you a little bit about. Yes.
Sorry, George, I'm just going to jump in really quickly. We are a little bit tight on time. Sure. Wondering whether you can just quickly wrap up. Thank you.
Sure. So I'd be very happy to make all these slides available. I have waffled on a bit there. I'm very sorry. But just to highlight at the very end here, the key challenges that we have to kind of address here. These are the type of challenges that we're trying to work through. So if there is anyone on the call, and happy to break this into the networking later, that is looking to address some of these, would love to talk with you. And thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, George. Really informative speech, especially on your kind of journey on procurement transformation. Thank you very much. So we have now put up a poll. So if you want to get in contact with George, then we'll make an introduction kind of separately after the event. So without further delay, I'd just like to welcome Martine from EMU Analytics, who will now step in to share her presentation. Martine, over to you.
Thank you. So hello everyone, I'm Martine Scarrett for EMU Analytics, and I'm here today to share a bit about our experience working with local authorities, in particular our journey in providing digital solutions to London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. Firstly, a bit about us. EMU Analytics is a London-based data analytics software company. We develop powerful geospatial analytics and visualization solutions, software solutions, to underpin everything from digital twins for improving operational management to effortless location data visualization for smart cities initiatives. We met London Borough of Barking and Dagenham and their head of insights and innovation, PA, through a Catapult project called Tombolo. The Tombolo project was an Innovate UK funded project won by the Future Cities Catapult, which, as you now know, is the Connected Places Catapult. And then they had then put out tenders for SMEs to come along and work on the project. We were asked to provide a solution that would sit above the Tombolo project and help visualize the various data brought in from local authorities. And one of these local authorities was, of course, Barking and Dagenham. When this project had ended, Barking and Dagenham had a desire to visualize their own data, more specifically the Social Progress Index, which allows them to understand the well-being of their residents. As the component that we had built for the Catapult had been placed into open source, we picked this up again and started to work with Barking and Dagenham to provide a mapping solution that would both allow the council to visualize their location data, but also easily share this output, the output of this data with their residents. And this is now the Borough Data Explorer, as you can see here, which Barking and Dagenham used to visualize a range of indicators that either contribute to their Borough Manifesto or Social Progress Index. This tool allows their residents to see performance on and progress of the borough through looking at indicators on anything from health and well-being through to housing and employability. I'm now going to show you a video of that we did with PA and Tony Doherty, who is a data scientist at the council, who will tell you a bit more about how they use the Borough Data Explorer.
The Location Insights Explorer is known as our Borough Data Explorer locally, and it is our way of democratizing data and insights to the public. Residents own their data, and it's our job to illustrate what we're capable of doing to improve outcomes for our borough.
Now that we have the Borough Data Explorer, it allows us to look at a wide range of measures, of indicators, to see how we compare to other London boroughs.
in local authorities, we have a commitment to our residents to make sure that we are in the right place at the right time with the right services for all of their needs. And the Borough Data Explorer helps us to articulate and visualize where those issues are in our borough.
And so the Borough Data Explorer is a really, really useful tool for the whole council, not just for the Insight Hub.
You don't need to be an expert in data to be able to use it. So despite data scientists helping to put it together, it is used across our organisation. It is used with our public sector partners, so the third sector are using it, the health partners are using it, and the general public are using it.
For me, just in my day-to-day job, the Borough Data Explorer is really useful. I often get people asking me about, have I got any data on this or any data on that. It's quite easy for me now just to send them a little link to the specific map within the Borough Data Explorer, so it's easy to share with them, and then I can send them the link straight away and they can go straight into the particular map about the indicator they were interested in and see that information.
I would recommend the Location Insights Explorer platform to any organisation that is very data rich and they want to make best use out of their data, especially if their data is geographically applicable.
So we have provided this Borough Data Explorer as a commercial service to the council ever since. From a procurement perspective, we actually went through the normal council procurement, gave them a proposal, they sent a purchase order and we invoiced them, the usual stuff. But as an SME working with a council, there is always a bit of a journey that you have to go on. So in the first year, we had to provide the solution very cheaply to allow Barking and Dagenham to understand the usefulness of the tool. So we actually sold it below cost, where we spent more money hosting it than we were paid. But this allowed the council to understand how useful it was to them. And this worked really well for both of us. And in the second year, they renewed it, the contract for something closer to a normal cost. And on the third year, which was last year, they renewed it for a 3-year contract. Since then, we have been looking into ways that we could make both the sales and procurement process easier in order to provide our digital solutions to the public sector. One way we have done this is to sign up to the G-Cloud framework. Now we are both on G-Cloud 11 and G-Cloud 12, which means any public sector body can quickly and easily procure cloud-based solutions like ours. And aside from this work with Barking and Dagenham, we have very positive experiences with councils who have found ways to fund their engagement with SMEs to do something new and innovative. We have done a number of projects, sorry, tripping over my words here, with Oxfordshire County Council, where the council has been a part of the winning consortium of innovation funding and then put out tenders for innovative SMEs to deliver parts of this project. We've worked with them in this capacity since about 2018, relating to EV charging, street lights replacement, and much more. And we have found that for councils to work with innovative small companies like ours, it has been a great option to acquire innovation funding to then collaborate with SMEs like us on new and exciting projects. This has been our experience so far, but I'm sure that a rethinking of the public procurement process to make it more responsive to innovation would be massively beneficial to collaborate with SMEs and accelerate innovation and technology adoption. Now, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in the Q&A or reach out to me on this email address after the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Martine. A really interesting work and a great case study on something that you've co-designed and made impact for local boroughs. So thank you very much. Again, we've put up a poll for you to connect with Martine. And finally, to move on, we have Jason from Urban and Integrated, who will now share his presentation. Jason, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me along today. I'm the founder and director of Urban Integrated Limited. We provide urban data platform solutions and we work very closely with cities. We have for many years since our inception in 2017, and we're a small SME with less than 10 employees in the UK. So I'm just going to share some slides when I work out how to do this on Zoom, which I'm sure isn't that hard. Give me 1 second. And I will press the right button, which is, here we go. Okay. course, we're not starting on the right slide. So the first one, that's just what this is. So a little bit more about what we do. We have an urban data platform which collects data from many different sources in real time, sensors and devices of all types. And we store, process and visualize that data through our cockpit tool, which provides a dashboard-like view and also a map view. And here's just some examples of where we do that today. And I could talk all about the platform, but actually I'm here to talk a little bit more about procurement and how interesting it is working with, the public sector as an SME. We work very successfully with local authorities. We've had some great projects and do have some great projects, for example, with Oxfordshire County Council on an EV charging project called Park and Charge. And, it takes time to build a relationship with local authorities. That's always the best way to engage with them. But, that's difficult, and it's hard to scale. The real challenge for an SME, and particularly if you've got innovative products and services, is how to engage in those more formal procurement processes. Starting off from how do you actually even find out about the opportunities? There's a proliferation of different procurement portals. There's no single source of truth, and we find new ones that pop up all the time. And so it's quite an overhead, for an SME to A, keep track of those, and B, make sure that we are, there are paid resources for access and aggregation of some of these opportunities. But again, it's time, cost, and energy. Then there are frameworks which are helpful. G-Cloud is one of the most well known, but again, the cost of those is very significant for an SME. Last year, we invested into making our services available on G-Cloud, and that took around 4 months, full-time equivalent resource. So a very significant investment. And again, we find new ones popping up. There's Pulse, which pops up last year. Again, a new portal, which again had a very high level of requirement in terms of information and data to be provided, similar to G-Cloud. But unlike G-Cloud, that particular portal had almost no opportunities on it, and also had no business that had been transacted by it. So, you need to be careful when you look at these frameworks on your cost benefits evaluation. In terms of the effect that has on a small SME, often if you've got an innovative solution, you need to run a pilot or a small proof of concept. And again, and we've been in a situation quite frequently with a local authority where they would very much like, because of a piece of pre-work or an engagement in a government funded project, to run a pilot or a slightly larger scale, but then you fall into the procurement trap of, if it's over a certain value, it needs to be formalized. And quite often we see those projects come to a full stop, or at best be delayed at that point. How to get around that one? Well, different local authorities have different views of those limits and how they can work with them. But again, it's about a true barrier, to innovation, especially as an SME. Again, larger organizations quite often can afford to invest in a pilot for the opportunity of a larger piece of work. But again, that is much more difficult for an SME. And often when we find opportunities that are suitable, the cost of bidding is often very high. We find that standard sets of procurement, requirements, again, which varies by local authority, are just included, and they can include quite stringent requirements which really don't fit well with innovation and SMEs. So, for example, quality standards like the ISO standards, and often, extensive requirements for, for financial history and standards, which again, if you're an SME and a startup, you're unlikely to have those. So, there's quite a few challenges there. I'm not sure what the answer is. I think previous speaker from EMU gave some very good tips in terms of, working with a local authority to, on a government-funded project from Innovate UK, which we've done and is very successful. But generally, you need to build that relationship first, and that can be pretty hard. So a mixed bag, really. So I'm open to any questions, and during the Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Really good to hear your kind of depth of knowledge and your experience in public procurement and, generally the engagement bit with local authorities. I'm sure that, a lot of SMEs will find it really helpful. So thank you for that. Again, we've put up a poll. If you want to get in contact with Jason, please indicate so. I think that concludes all our speakers. So our next session now for the next 25 minutes is the panel discussion chaired by Malcolm Harbour. I'd just like to ask all the speakers to turn on their videos again. It looks like we also have a lot of questions, but for anyone in the audience, if you haven't yet, please put your questions in the Q&A function now. I'll pass the floor to Malcolm to lead.
Okay,
so, Malcolm,
well, thanks.
you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Well, it's really interesting presentations, and I made lots of notes. So I'm going to sort of pick up a number of the common points, and we are going to focus on this issue about procurement. So why don't we take it a bit logically through the whole process? And I think a number of you made the point about actually finding out the opportunities. And I think particularly one of you mentioned specifically about the fact that there's quite a sort of proliferation of information. So perhaps each of you could indicate, how would you like to see the system change so you can find out more quickly what are the opportunities available? George, I think I'm going to give you perhaps the start on that, because I think you mentioned that in your presentation, and you've also been involved in trying to improve that with the systems that you've been providing in London.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a big value in contracts under 10K, which don't appear on Contracts Finder, which is arguably the best centralized source of contract information. I think over 15K, it's mandated to be putting advertising on the Contracts Finder of new opportunities. I'd probably also look at rethinking the SME suitable for SMEs tick box on Contracts Finder, because some of our data analysis, every single opportunity is ticked as SME friendly. It seems like a convenient box to tick when ultimately it doesn't actually mean anything. I think, yeah, definitely there's a lot of value in those under 10K contracts. We see that the boroughs in London have a number of those which they don't actually advertise because they don't have to, and they are single source supplied by specific suppliers they have in our network, in their network. And that's an opportunity for SMEs, because when we consider then a pre-engagement and getting on the radar of the councils, then that's great. It is also the ticket size that is going to be more suitable for SMEs, and it's off the radar of the big companies as well. They wouldn't waste their time doing that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's what I think primarily they're the ones we're trying to aggregate. They're the ones that are lost to the mandated aggregation or mandated advertising.
Yeah. And Martine, I think you made similar points. So I wanted to just focus a particular question to you about the way you'd approach your contract, which was interesting, about a whole different pricing structure for the contract. But more fundamentally, and it's a question for all of you, we'll perhaps work through that. how do you get ideas into a council? I mean, do you find that councils do have some sort of interface where you can take ideas to them, or are you always waiting for them to come up with potential problems for you to solve?
So I think a way that, like I mentioned in my presentation, that councils have ideas and then they kind of outsource for solutions is when they apply for innovation funding and then they bring along SMEs to work with them. I think that is a very good way of actually getting that first relationship that Jason mentioned, where you actually get to talk to them, because it's so difficult to understand what their problem is. You know that they have various challenges and you know that you could probably solve a few of them through your solutions, but it's hard to kind of get that initial conversation with them. So actually looking at where they are eager to do something innovative, that is a good way to kind of get that conversation going. And then once you have started that relationship, you've maybe tried to do some innovation, then you can actually crack on with more day-to-day challenges that they have.
Do you think then, just a supplementary on that, do you think that councils could do better in actually maybe sort of opening out more challenges in a very broad sense about problems they want to solve? To have a much more sort of open dialogue at the beginning before moving to a contract stage, and even getting citizens involved. I mean, I've seen some of those around the world, in fact. I mean, have you come across any of those, or do you think that's something we should be encouraging?
I think that's always something to encourage, but I also don't think that necessarily councils are holding off on trying new things. I think it's more of a limitation on their part as well, that's where innovation funding is such a good way, where they can actually open up and say, this is something we would like to try out, this is a challenge that we have, and we'd like to get some SMEs along to help.
Okay, I'd like to come back to that point in a moment, actually, but Jason, could you give us your perspective on some of these issues? And you particularly raised the question about pre-qualification and the cost of bids, which I was particularly interested in, having tried as a legislator to make it much simpler in the main legislation. And I was a bit disappointed in your observation that councils are not consistent in the requirements that they put in for pre-qualification for people to bid.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely inconsistent. We deal with lots of local authorities up and down the country, and we also work internationally, so it's very different internationally. And it's hard to kind of give any recommendations in terms of how to approach it. We tend to sort of qualify our opportunities very heavily to make sure that we're as efficient as we can be, with our resources. But consistency, I think, is one of the key things that I think would help SMEs in terms of being able to have generally a requirement or an RFI is made up of a section that's specific to the particular opportunity, and then the rest is kind of generic, that's put together by the procurement team in that particular organization. And often that standard set of documents is as hard to respond to as the really interesting bit, which is the technical solution. There's just some reality that often we'll be competing against large organizations that are very well known, and they just frankly have a lot more resource to put into the writing of the bid and making it look nice. And although the content might be similar, I mean, it's just human nature that people like shiny things. It catches the eye. So there are a lot of issues, and though I've seen lots of local authorities talk about being friendly to SMEs, I've seen very few take really positive action, particularly action that flows through from let's say a policy level view to support SMEs flow through to the actual departments that are there, you know, writing the procurement and you know, and scoring the procurements. And there's often a gap between, you know, a policy over here to support SMEs and the people that are actually doing the process still stick to the old process, which, you know, frankly favours large organisations. I mean, that is ultimately, and I know that very well because I had a career change when I went from, you know, the large SIs and outsourcing market to starting my own business because I was completely, you know, fed up of the relationship between, you know, those particular big outsourcing period of the sort of, you know, the 2000s.
That's very helpful for all of you. I would like to explore that further, but actually you've given us, I think, for our own research, some really interesting pointers about, I mean, I think it's quite unacceptable for us not to have a simpler common framework for SMEs, which is actually, if you read the legislation, built in there. So thank you very much for focusing on that. But I wanted to move on then to a point that Martine in particular raised, and I think all of you are involved in this, is actually how you've been involved. And this is very, very common for digital companies in particular, in pre-commercial, shall we say, procurement contests. We're certainly familiar with the things that Innovate UK are organising, like SBRI, and I'd be interested to know whether you've been involved in any of those directly. But I think the real issue is, and Jason, I wanted to come to you first because you raised this particularly, is what happens after you've had some development work funded by one of these contracts, and then the frustrations of actually trying to move it forward into a deployment contract. And I suspect all of you may have had some experience of that. So I'll perhaps ask you to start on that, and then I'll bring George and Martine in as well.
So also, we've done a number of co-creation projects with local authorities, notably with Oxford County Council, who've been a great partner, I'd say. You know, they're very friendly. I know EMU's worked with them too. They've been very supportive of SMEs in the local SME community. I'm based in Oxfordshire. But it is a challenge, and you know, to get to move from a pilot to scale up. You know, I'm on a very large 25 million H2020 project with London, Lisbon, and Milan, and scale up was always, you know, the challenge. And you know, we're currently working very hard with OCC to work out a method of a sustainable business model for EV charging on the back of an Innovate UK project. Infrastructure is particularly difficult and a little bit unusual because you need to make a very large investment up front, and the return on investment needs to be recovered over many years, which again is a little bit of odds with procurement regulations, because you know, effectively, you know, anything after 5 years gets difficult in terms of renewal. And you know, overall, my view of the innovation market is you know, you've got quite a few exemplar local authorities who have led the way. The difficulty is scaling it up and making it consistent across, you know, the UK, where, you know, I did a webinar a few weeks ago with Microsoft and a few, and I called it, you know, no more pilots, because I'm sure anyone that's worked in innovation area, there's so many pilots that fail to achieve scale, even though when there's a, you know, a clear value, it's not business case.
Yeah, George, what's your view about that?
I think the point around frameworks is that yes, it would be great to have more frameworks, but there are quite a lot of frameworks. You have the G-Cloud framework, and you know, that Martine's also just got onto, and they provide a standardized set of, you know, applications and specification questions. The issue we have with London and the boroughs is that they all, and also for the different councils across the UK, they all have different ones when they're procuring directly. And I think it really requires, you know, yes, within frameworks there is a safe haven of some standardization, but it does really require some more Cabinet Office intervention to more mandate some of these kind of more procurement specification questions. And like Jason was saying, there is that luxury of having, and it's very important to have a very varied set of questions around the solution and the product and the technicalities of it. But when it comes to things like the financial due diligence or things like the security due diligence and these types of things, they don't need to be always so disparate and so different, because as I think Jason also brought up and Martin said, there is a big disparity between the time that a procurement team in an Accenture has to throw at an opportunity versus a time-strapped startup. So I think that's kind of my view on frameworks, to be honest.
Okay, that's up. Yes, Martin, would you like to comment on that? Because I think you also been through a similar experience with G Cloud and as a specific framework. None of you, I noticed, have mentioned Spark, which I think is the major, which the Crown Commercial Services are very keen on moving forward in the digital space. But Martin.
So firstly, I just wanted to agree with Jason in the way that Oxfordshire has been a great partner, and I think that's something that I hope other councils may want to copy in terms of starting off with innovation, but actually moving it forward to, scaling it up and business as usual, and not just leaving it as like an innovation idea, but actually turning it into something, because that's why we want to invest in innovation, is to actually improve processes. So that's a wish of mine, that we could, move innovation forward to actually be bigger project. And on the framework note, I think a personal gripe for us is also the cost that Jason mentioned. That is, as an SME, that is difficult to kind of deal with, and so that's always something that you have to weigh up. In a dream world, maybe we would have a framework where you could have opportunities where you didn't have to pay or lose out on some of the revenue from the opportunity, but I don't know if that's realistic.
I mean, you mentioned Spark. So we looked at Spark last summer because there were some opportunities that got delayed by COVID that reappeared on Spark. And one of the requirements on Spark was you had to demonstrate 3 contracts, actual contracts with local authorities. Now, again, as an SME startup, that's a hard thing to do. And then Spark had the same level of content pretty much to G Cloud. So why on earth can't Spark talk to G Cloud or go, okay, you're already on G Cloud, tick this box. Okay. There's some simple stuff that, I don't know who's sitting in government making this stuff up, but they're definitely not talking to people like us. That's for sure.
I think we are trying to play our role in that. But I think that the lack of integrated policy making is something that's come out very clearly from all of you, and is something that we should be doing something about. Now, I mean, I wanted to move on to a third subject. So first of all, thank you. It's very, very useful material for us to follow up.
Do you mind if I just make one?
Go on.
I think Connected City Catapult could help us here. And one of the key things that is very useful, it's all about the relationship for SMEs. More that you can do to get us in a room, be it virtual or otherwise, with local authority representatives. To me, that's the single biggest thing that an organisation like you guys could do to help us. So, hands up.
I think we are trying. I think my colleagues are really trying to do that. You are. In a sense, this is what it's all about. And one of you, I think, has been involved in you said that in a particular project from CPC anyway, to show how we work. I wanted to just move on to a third topic, which came up very much, which is this whole question about aggregation and scale of contracts. I think George in particular made the point about how London boroughs in a particular area I'll put out contracts. They're not aggregating their demands in any way, pulling that together. But I think the broader question, though, which was raised in the Q&A, is aggregation actually good for SMEs or not? Because obviously the larger the contract, it makes it more attractive to the big players. So that was the first point I perhaps to address, but I just want to link it with the fact that I'm very interested that you've both raised Oxfordshire as an interesting example. because I've also spent some time with them on some of their contracts. And I think what interested me was that they deliberately set out to pull together a consortium of SMEs to meet a particular technical requirement and encourage those. But they needed to put a framework together to bring a group of suppliers together, a consortium of some kind. And is that a model that you worked in, and is it something we should be looking at? So I'd like to sort of pick up your questions on aggregation. I mean, I think, George, you started on that as being one of your principal complaints, essentially. I mean, what's your view about what we should be doing about that?
Yeah, I kind of sit in the middle of SMEs and boroughs. So I agree with one of the questions. Someone made a point that it's not friendly for SMEs. It's not, no. But it is very friendly in terms of collaboration between boroughs, and some of the benefits on the borough side to group purchasing power, more consolidated integration between solutions, rather than data silos and the rest of it. So yeah, but I completely agree with Jason. I think a lot of these SME problems can be overcome by just more engagement. And I think second to that is this idea of making it easier for them to actually apply. So there's a lot of talk about passports right now, and I think a procurement passport might be interesting. But yeah, I think that the number one problem is really just getting the foot in the door in the first place, even being on the radar. So I completely agree with Jason on that.
Okay. There is a European electronic procurement passport, by the way, but we don't seem to have adopted it. Martin.
We will now, Eva. No.
Martin, what's your view about you? Because you raised also a point on aggregation as well. I think you're muted. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. So to be honest, I don't really have the answer for this. I think what George said was very interesting. So I'd like to just pass it on to Jason, maybe.
Right. Well, before I pass on to Jason, as I said, we're just moving to the end of the session. So I'm going to ask each of you to come up with one particular idea or ask from today's session to put to us and the audience in a moment. But I'm going to ask Jason to tackle the question of aggregation first, and then I'll come back and ask, and you can leave us with your big idea as well. So, Jason.
I'll have to try and think of a big idea, but aggregation, I mean, it's on the face of it, it seems it's helpful. I mean, Oxfordshire, I don't think had a particular strategy around SMEs. I think we've been involved in the development of the team there over several years. And I think, now they've probably got a good model, which, I think other local authorities could definitely learn lessons from. And I know they're keen to share. But Oxfordshire isn't the only one. It just happens on this call. You've got two organisations that work with them. I've done quite a bit of work with GLA and currently working with GLA. They're very good. But I think, knowledge sharing from other local authorities, standard templates for procurement, something that recognises that SMEs are different and have got something special to offer, and helping building those relationships. I mean, if there's one thing that could probably be done today that helps, it's the relationship building. I think the other more structural elements around changing the processes are super important, but they're going to take longer to do. So I guess that would be my view on it.
I'll just make one quick last point, Malcolm. So Jason said,
I'm done.
Maybe think of so yeah, I think aggregation, disaggregation, there's nothing wrong with either or, but it's using them in the right situation with the right procurement. I think that's very important, and trying to have some index or understanding of where best they're used, I think is important. But then the other point I wanted to make was around, I think a lot more needs to be done around, I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but co-creation. But I don't think aggregation is necessary at the procurement stage. Aggregation can be at the solution architecture stage. So when you're looking to, if you take a challenge and you're looking to define or decide this is a proposition to solve that challenge, That that is aggregation. You're aggregating a number of potential solutions to say this can help together, and with an integrated architecture or as an integrated solution, whether it's a sensor, and then it's an EMU analytics dashboard or whatever, as a joint proposition. Great. Now you can go out and procure disaggregately. You can go and procure the SME different to the large supplier who provide, like the Bosch or Siemens who provides the sensors and the rest of it, and get over some of those issues that we're talking about with disaggregation at the procurement stage. But I think we need to think about it's the solution definition stage where there just needs to be more aggregation, and maybe aggregation is the wrong word. It's collaboration. It's cross-borough engagement and the rest of it. And the easiest way to do that is by bringing them together around a shared challenge. And you brought that up, right? You brought up around this idea of defining the challenge in procurement rather than defining the solution or the problem.
Good. All right. I'll take that as your big takeaway from us. Martine, what's the big message that you want us to leave us with? If you have one special ask.
So I think that's pretty much what I've been kind of banging on about, is that I don't think it's about the willingness from the councils, the local authorities. I think it's kind of the options out there for them to actually invest in smaller companies, because that usually means innovation. That means that they have to kind of take a bit of a risk, and so they can't really use taxpayer money in that sense to kind of go out and try something new. But trying something new is so important. So I think just more ways to fund innovative projects is very, very good.
Thank you very much. So Jason, I'll give you the last word then.
I was going to say that we're in quite an unusual point in history where innovation is vital to all of us, and I think this is a big ticket thing. It's a very different landscape from 10 years ago when I was with Capgemini and Siemens trying to sell big outsourcing and shared services deals to local authorities. Now we are literally looking at the future of our of our cities and our children, things like EV and air pollution. So innovation has to be built in to our relationship with with cities, because if it's not, these things are going to fail. So this isn't just a bunch of SMEs moaning because they're struggling to grow their business. There's actually a really serious point behind all of this.
Totally agree.
Good. Okay. Well, it's good to have an agreement, and thank you all very much for sharing your expertise in this way. Just to say that I've been having a look at the questions. There have been quite a lot of questions there about subjects relating to what we should be procuring, particularly in environmental and electric vehicle aspects. We will be circulating the questions. We're certainly looking at them and pass them on to panelists who may be able to answer them directly. But we have been focusing very much on procurement today. So thank you all very much indeed. And I'm now going to hand back to Sarah, I think, for just to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really interesting, really great discussion. And, thanks again to all speakers today for sharing with us their experience in procurement and with engaging with local authorities. So before I hand over to Ollie next, I just want to let all attendees know that we have now opened up the chat function for you to put yourself down for networking. So please, if you could just follow the instruction on the screen with put in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so without further delay, I'll hand over to Ollie to share with us some upcoming opportunities that we're launching on innovation procurement.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, everybody. I'll try and move through this quickly so that we can get into the discussion, because I actually thought that panel session was really rich. Thank you for all of our participants in that. And I hope it didn't come across as focusing too much on the barriers, because I just feel it's really important and great to have this kind of session where we are all openly sharing the difficulties that you as suppliers have, so that part of CQC's mission is to try and help support you and change those processes and thinking around all of this. So we fully welcome that, and I look forward to what happens next in the breakout rooms. So if we could just pop to the next slide, there's a couple of things that I wanted to announce today. So especially in light of the first poll, where there was a fairly high degree of unfamiliarity amongst our audience today, we have recently, in the last couple of days, just published this brief handout. It's only 6 or 7 pages long, and it's designed to just be a primer for what are tenders, what are some of the phrases and terminology that's used in this space, how to find tender opportunities that came up, where are the key places that one might look for that, how might you start approaching these processes if you haven't done before, and a few key do's and don'ts for when you're writing bid applications. So hopefully that's helpful. We will be circulating these slides afterwards, so you can click through and find this document, but it's openly on our website. For example, someone in the questions asked what Spark is, and I can say nominally it's an innovation-focused dynamic purchasing system, but that by itself maybe doesn't mean anything to you, so this document hopefully would help answer some of that. It's designed to be fairly lightweight, but if it's useful and you'd like to see more, obviously we'd love to hear whether it was helpful, what else you would like to see in this space. If we just pop on to the next slide, there's another little launch that we're doing today. So this is aimed at a slightly different audience than most of you guys today. This CPC have recently worked with the Open Agile Smart Cities organization, and we have put together a short course that is a primer on innovation and challenge-led procurement, which George covered nicely in his slides, for city commissioners. It has a global audience, but it will have high relevance to the UK commissioners as well. And we hope this is a great way to stimulate colleagues who are new to the space, consider different ways of going out and addressing the market and communicating with suppliers, which touches on some of the themes that we discussed today. So we look forward to people joining and learning from that as well. Nick, I think we also just had one final quick poll before we move on to the breakout rooms. So there will be 2 questions again. The first one is just asking, reflecting on the panel discussion, how effective do we think that the current methods to stimulate and procure innovation are? Just very broad strokes. If you have specific comments, by the way, of course, leave them in the Q&A or the chat, and we will look at and consider afterwards. So yeah, if we just pop to the results, lovely. Okay, well, that's good. That's what I like, is open and honest responses, and that shows, as we have discussed, that whilst there has been improvement in the last decade in this space, I believe that there is a considerable distance to go. The government has shown some desire to change this with their recent green paper, to change legislation around this, but I think that highlights quite how much we would like to see changed. And there's one more question, Nick, just pop that up, which is just for our own selfish knowledge gathering. Was this session useful? Was it a useful discussion? Would you like to see more in this space? So just give 10 seconds or so for people to vote on that. And move to the results. Oh, well, great. Resoundingly, yes, more detail. Okay, well, as I say, by all means, if there are specific things that you would like to see discussed in more detail around all of this space, please either drop it in messages in the Q&A now, or my email is in the slide deck, so by all means get in touch afterwards and we'll be happy to discuss. That's the end of my content, so Sarah, you just prime us up for the next steps.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ollie. So I think nearing the end of the session now, but before I close off and move you to networking, just want to share with you 3 of our upcoming events. So next one is on the 15th of April, tomorrow. We'll be running a webinar on track worker safety innovation, which is a network rail technology development call. So if you're interested in this sort of opportunity, please feel free to sign up for this information webinar session. On the 22nd of April, we'll be having an event as part of our monthly Third Thursday series, and this will be looking at creating sustainable hubs of innovation across the UK. So exploring how roles of districts, corridors and quarters help stimulate private sector investment to create jobs and revitalise local areas across UK regions. And then on the 12th of May, as you would like to, most of you would like to find out more about the challenging procurement aspect, Ollie Kush will be hosting and leading on this the next challenging procurement webinar series. And finally, on the 9th of June, we'll be having our next virtual Connections Café, which we hope to see you all there. So next slide, please. So yeah, I think this wraps everything up. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you all the speakers and panel chair, Malcolm, for joining us today and making the discussion so fruitful. And to everyone else, if you have any questions or would like to speak to someone at Catapult, please don't hesitate to contact us on one of our addresses that we've shown you on the previous slide. But now we'll just move on to our networking session. So what's going to happen now, we will be broken into 3 networking rooms. It will be one of the speakers per networking room. And we've opened up the chat function. So please, if you can, indicate on the chat which room you'd like to be in, 1, 2, or 3, and just make a note of the webinar ID and the passcode here. You will have to leave and exit this Zoom webinar and then join the other virtual room using this ID and passcode. Just so you know, we will be keeping this main session room open as well. So just in case if you have any problems, one of my colleagues will be able to be around to help. So yes, hopefully we will see you all very soon in the other room. And thank you so much for joining us today. See you soon.
Nine, 8, 4, 6, 1, 0, 3, 1, 6, 4, 0, 0, 1, 6.